My name is Hester Buhur, and I was 21 when the reality of home shifted beneath my feet. Mom had passed away just a few months earlier, and grief had already carved quiet corridors through my life. I thought the hardest part was losing her. I thought I understood what emptiness felt like. Then Dad handed me the notice. It wasn't dramatic. No tears, no shouting, no turning of the page in some final, cinematic gesture. He didn't even look at me. The paper slid across the kitchen table, stopping just short of my elbow. Printed neatly, black ink on white, no room for misunderstanding. Rent due on the 1st, utilities excluded. No explanation, no apology. Just numbers, dates, and margins like a cold, indifferent line drawn in the sand. Okay, I said finally, my voice smaller than I expected. Because what else could I say? This was still home, or at least that's the word I kept whispering to myself, even though the shape of it had changed the moment Mom's casket disappeared down the driveway. The house felt misaligned now. Floors creaked differently, the hallway seemed narrower, the kitchen counter sharper, almost accusing. I transferred $750 every month after that, never questioned it, never asked why. It became physics. Unavoidable, inevitable. I polished the counters, aligned my shoes at the door, stayed on my side of the house. I learned to be quiet in a way that didn't draw attention. Quiet seemed like the only currency left that I could use here. Kayla, my older sister, floated above all this. She called once during those months, her voice stretched thin with what I now recognized as performative concern. "Did you see the necklace Dad got me for graduation?" she asked. I hadn't. She sent a photo anyway, gold glinting against her collarbone. "Family money," she said. "Don't make it weird." I didn't reply. I made dinner, ate standing, and went to bed without turning on the light. My 21st birthday arrived on a Thursday. I didn't expect anything. Not gifts, not cake, not even acknowledgement. That night, we sat at the table. Dad, Kayla, and me. He poured wine into 2 glasses, one for himself, one for Kayla. None for me. I noticed, but I didn't say anything. Silence had become survival. Then, as if to mark the day with both ritual and insult, he tipped the bottle too far. Red wine splashed across the table, soaked into my sleeve. I drew in a sharp breath and tried to push his hand away. "It's just to disinfect a poor girl," he laughed, as though the spill was a joke. And then casually, he added, "Go ahead and transfer the $300,000 to your sister." I stared. My fork froze in midair. Kayla twirled hers, smiling lightly, as if this was a normal conversation. Something inside me shut, a door clicking quietly in a hallway I didn't know existed. Later, when I reached for a slice of bread, Dad snapped his hand around my wrist. "Ask first," he said. Kayla didn't even pause. I nodded, throat thick. "Okay," I murmured, the weight of my own compliance pressing down. The next morning, they left for a 2-week cruise. Kayla posted a photo within the hour. Blue water, champagne flute, captioned, "When you do things right, life gives you luxury." I returned home from work that evening, and the key didn't fit. I tried again. Same result. On the door, a typed note, "Go stay with Grandma." I didn't knock. I didn't call. I sat on the porch, hoodie pulled over my head, and waited for the sun to vanish. I told myself this was temporary, that grief had sharpened Dad into someone colder, that he was acting from loss and not malice. But even as I told myself that, the hum of the house, lights flickering inside, the faint clatter of dishes, felt like a message: "You are no longer a part of this life." Inside, Kayla had taken over the master bedroom. She called it Mom's room but had painted it pale green, claiming it helped with migraines. I offered to help move boxes once. She looked at me like I'd spoken nonsense. "You're still here." The mailbox rattled that afternoon. One card from Grandma. No return address, just my name. Inside, $50 and shaky handwriting. "You're not invisible to me. Use this for something sweet. You always made my tea just right." It wasn't much, but it was the first thread of warmth I'd touched in months. That night, I sat on the curb, reading and rereading her words until my chest ached. And for the first time in weeks, I felt seen. The next few days blurred together in a strange haze. I stayed at Grandma's small apartment, careful not to unpack too much, careful not to be seen as permanent. My father's rules hung over me like a shadow. Pay rent, stay quiet, stay invisible. The irony wasn't lost on me. He had finally enforced a line in the house, and I'd been pushed outside it. I returned one afternoon to collect a few essentials I'd left behind. My key still didn't fit. I pressed my hand against the smooth wood of the front door, the grain familiar, yet unwelcoming. On the porch, I noticed the faint scuff marks by the door handle, Kayla's heels, or maybe her impatience. A typed note fluttered slightly in the breeze. Do not attempt to enter. Respect the rules. I didn't knock. I didn't call. I sat on the curb and watched the sun reflect off the windows, imagining the life inside, the laughter, the clinking of glasses, the faint scent of Kayla's perfume. It was a life that had once been mine, claimed without ceremony or explanation. That evening, I checked my phone. A notification from the bank. My stomach sank. Dad had added Kayla as the primary account holder on the savings my mom had opened for me when I was 16. Emergency fund, college money, something safe. All of it now technically under her control. My balance was nearly gone, $31.74 left, enough for a couple days' groceries if I rationed. The deeper I scrolled, the more I understood. Cruises booked, spa appointments, transfers to her small Etsy business, everything was being funneled out of my account, legally, meticulously. And I hadn't even been notified. The message was clear: you exist at our discretion. I didn't cry. Not yet. I sat on the edge of Grandma's couch, staring at the ceiling. The house, the funds, the security, all of it had been stripped from me silently. I felt like a ghost wandering through memories, not allowed to touch the present. The next morning, I went back to the house, not to reclaim it, but to observe. Kayla's things had already taken over every space that had once been Mom's. A perfume bottle on the counter, a bright scarf hanging on the coat rack, photos I didn't recognize. She had repainted walls, relabeled shelves, claimed spaces as if she had been born to inhabit them. I noticed the mailbox rattled again. One card, again from Grandma. Her handwriting was shaky but deliberate. You're not invisible to me. Use this for something sweet. You always made my tea just right. I hugged the card to my chest and held it there longer than was reasonable, imagining Mom had somehow slipped through the cracks of the world to remind me I mattered. Later that week, I returned to the house under the guise of collecting another small item: a jacket, a desk lamp, a photo of Mom and me for my last birthday. The door had been locked, alarms set. Every lock, every sensor, a reminder that I was unwelcome. I felt the familiar hollow in my chest, that quiet ache that grief had left behind, but now it had a name: exclusion. I didn't break in. I didn't yell. I just observed. Lights went on, footsteps echoed, Kayla laughing somewhere in the house as if she owned it. My father's voice carried faintly, clipped and controlled. I imagined the conversation that must have been happening: logistics, finances, plans for the future, all done without me. It hit me slowly that this wasn't about grief anymore. It wasn't about loss. It was about control. Dad's cold enforcement of rent, the calculated exclusion, the rerouted bank accounts, everything was deliberate. They were reconfiguring reality so I didn't exist in it. I went back to Grandma's that evening. Her apartment smelled of baked bread and lavender. It was warm and small, a sanctuary I hadn't realized I needed. She handed me a mug of tea, and I accepted it with shaking hands. "Hester," she said, soft but firm, "they can't erase you. You remember everything, you act carefully, and you stay true. That's your power." Her words were simple, but they struck a chord. Mom had always taught me the same lesson, in quiet ways. The one who stays, the one who observes, the one who plans. I had dismissed it at the time, thinking it was just a metaphor for patience. Now, it felt like armor. That night, I sat on the curb, writing notes in my phone. The house deed, bank accounts, social media patterns, utility bills, trust documents. I didn't know how I would use them yet. I only knew that I had to start gathering facts, because facts never lied. People did. I glanced at Kayla's social media one last time. A photo of her on the cruise deck, feet stretched out, champagne in hand. Dad's comment underneath: "Proud of you." Not a word for me, not a glance in my direction, not a single acknowledgement. She had been polished and perfected for their narrative. I had been removed. I closed my phone and exhaled slowly. This was the reality now, a house I once called home, a family that had quietly decided I didn't belong, and a mother whose legacy was slowly being rewritten in their favor. But I remembered Grandma's words. I remembered Mom's lessons. The one who stays sees everything, waits patiently, and acts deliberately. I would stay. I would observe. And when the time came, I would act. The next morning, I woke up with a heaviness in my chest I hadn't felt before. It wasn't just grief anymore. It was a creeping, suffocating realization. The house, the accounts, the legacy my mom had worked for, all of it was being stripped from me, one careful, deliberate step at a time. I went through my email first. Notifications from the bank, statements I hadn't received before, alerts about transfers I didn't authorize. Dad had added Kayla as the primary on every account that had been partially mine. Every emergency fund, every savings plan, even the small account Mom had set up for just the two of us, it was gone. My balance, $31. $31 to survive, $31 to remind me I didn't exist. I felt a surge of anger, but it was sharp and quiet, like ice sliding under my skin. Crying wouldn't fix this. Complaining wouldn't fix this. The only thing that could fix this was understanding the rules of the game they had set and figuring out how to play it better. I logged into the accounts, combing through every transaction. Cruises, spa treatments, transfers to Kayla's little side projects, everything had been accounted for. Legally, it was perfect. Dad had made sure of that. They weren't breaking laws, they were exploiting loopholes, taking advantage of trust, of grief, of my silence. I opened the savings account Mom had made for me when I was 16, the one she had called our emergency fund. I had assumed it was mine. But a notice flashed on the screen, new authorized users added. Dad. Kayla. Not me. They had made me secondary without telling me. And then I saw it, a linked account I didn't recognize. A trust. Education and Security Fund, the title read. Balance. $300,000. Date opened, 6 weeks before Mom passed. Beneficiaries. JT and KT. Not me. I slumped back in the chair, my hands trembling over the keyboard. That dinner table moment replayed in my mind, the red wine, Dad's smile, the casual command to transfer $300,000 to Kayla. That was never about a joke. That was never about misunderstanding. That was the plan. I felt erased, invisible, removed. And for the first time in months, the quiet I had used as armor felt suffocating. I needed information. I needed proof. I needed evidence of everything they had done. The next step was the house itself. Keys still worked for me technically, but Dad had changed the locks on digital systems, alarms, and security codes. Kayla had begun painting and decorating, filling spaces with her life while I remained outside. The house that had been mine, that had been our mother's, was now a stage for their performance. I began documenting everything. Photos of the mailbox, the notes, screenshots of Kayla's social media posts, copies of email alerts, timestamps, transaction records. Every detail mattered. I had to know exactly what they could claim, exactly how they had rewritten reality. Grandma called in the evening. Her voice trembled slightly, but there was determination in it. Hester, she said, they can't erase you. You have to stay calm, stay patient, and stay careful. Your mother left you something. She always planned ahead. I asked her what she meant, and she only smiled faintly. You'll see soon enough. But for now, gather what they've missed. Observe. Take notes. You know your mother's rules. The one who stays wins. Her words repeated in my head like a mantra as I returned to the house under the cover of dusk. Security cameras, alarms, locks, every obstacle reminded me they thought I had no power here. They had forgotten one thing. The one who observes sees everything. I found the garage open, quiet except for a faint smell of Mom's old cedar-scented cleaner. That's when I noticed a small black duffel bag tucked in the corner, partially hidden behind a stack of boxes. Mom's earthquake bag. Beans, old sweaters, a flashlight, notebooks. Nothing seemed extraordinary until I felt the weight of a manila folder at the bottom. Inside was a copy of the house deed. Handwritten notes in faded blue ink. If anything happens to me, make sure Hester stays safe. An arrow pointed directly to my name. My hands shook as I held the paper, my mind racing through the months of subtle and overt erasure. Mom had anticipated this. She had protected me, silently, deliberately. I left the garage and sat on the porch, folding my hands around a mug of lukewarm tea, thinking through what I had discovered. I wasn't powerless. I wasn't invisible. I had the facts, the evidence, and the guidance left behind by the one person who had always been on my side. For the first time in weeks, a plan began to form. I would observe, I would gather evidence, and when the moment came, I would act. The house, the funds, the inheritance, it wasn't just property. It was proof of their intentions, of their manipulation. And I wasn't done. That night, I wrote everything down: bank statements, deeds, emails, social media screenshots, utility notices, transaction records. Each detail became a piece of armor. Each fact became a tool. And when the time came, I would wield them carefully, deliberately, like Mom had taught me. I fell asleep on Grandma's couch that night feeling something I hadn't in months. Focus. Not grief, not anger, not fear. Focus. And for the first time, I began to believe that the house, the inheritance, and my place in this world were not lost forever. They were simply waiting for me to claim them. The morning sun hit Grandma's apartment like a spotlight, but I didn't notice it. My mind was elsewhere, on the folder I had found in the garage, on the deed tucked inside, on every small detail that Mom had left behind. It wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a map, a lifeline, and the proof I needed that I wasn't being erased by chance. I went back through the house that day, under the guise of checking for forgotten items. Each step across the porch, each glance through the window, reinforced the reality of exclusion. Kayla had begun arranging Mom's old furniture to fit her vision, painting, rearranging, making herself at home. Dad lingered in the background, checking his phone, overseeing, ensuring everything proceeded smoothly. They didn't see me, but I saw everything. The black duffel bag, the folder, the deed, these weren't the only things Mom had left. Beneath the folder was a small locked briefcase. I knew instinctively where the key would be, taped beneath the false drawer in her jewelry box, just like she had always hidden small treasures when I was a child. The velvet pouch in my hand contained a silver key, worn smooth. A label read, "Front door. Keep safe." Inside the briefcase, everything was meticulously organized. Notarized amendments to Mom's will, USB drives with digital backups, tax documents, photographs, lists of accounts and passwords. Every contingency she had imagined, every scenario she might have feared, was already covered. The amendments were clear: the house would pass fully to me if anyone attempted coercion or misconduct. If disputed, a legal trustee would ensure the transfer. Not Dad, not Kayla, not even her best friend Paula. I sat on the concrete floor of the garage, the cold seeping through my jeans, and stared at Mom's handwriting until my hands stopped shaking. Every detail mattered. Every note, every signature, every legal safeguard was a tool I could use. And I would use them. By mid-afternoon, I began to organize. The house deed, the trust documents, bank statements, utility bills, emails, screenshots of social media, even small notes Kayla had left behind, they all went into a digital and physical file. The process was methodical. I wrote summaries for each category, cross-referencing every piece of information. Every hole in their plan became an opportunity for me to act. Grandma watched quietly as I worked. "Hester," she said finally, "you're not just fighting for a house. You're fighting for the principle of your life. They can't erase you if you know the rules and follow them. Your mother made sure of that." Her words echoed Mom's lessons: the one who stays sees everything. The one who plans acts deliberately. The one who waits, but never silently, wins. I spent that night at Grandma's creating a timeline. All interactions, all notices, all bank updates, social media posts, locks changed, exclusion tactics. Every action by Dad and Kayla was mapped, documented, and time-stamped. By the time the sky darkened, I had a complete picture. Their plan was detailed, but so was mine. The next morning, I returned to the house under cover. I didn't knock. I didn't call. I only observed. Kayla was in the kitchen, rearranging a cabinet. Dad was checking a tablet, reviewing a list. Neither of them noticed me. But I noticed everything: where the cameras were, how the alarms reacted, the flow of movement through the house. Every detail became data. That evening, I logged into the digital copies of Mom's documents. The amendments were notarized, the trusts properly executed, all legal safeguards intact. There was no ambiguity. I had everything I needed to reclaim what was mine. But this wasn't about revenge. Not yet. It was about justice, about ensuring that the life Mom had built, her legacy, her care, her memory, could not be stolen by greed or favoritism. I wrote down my plan in clear, simple steps. Gather evidence of exclusion and misconduct. Confirm legal ownership through Mom's amendments and trust documents. Secure the house physically with the keys Mom left me. Document and expose any attempted intrusion. Ensure a controlled, safe resolution without confrontation if possible. It felt almost mechanical to write it down like that, but the act gave me a strange sense of calm. Months of grief and helplessness had been replaced with a strategy. The house, the accounts, even Kayla and Dad's scheming, they all existed within the framework I could control now. Later, I called Paula, Mom's trusted friend. She answered like she had been waiting. I explained everything briefly, showing her what I had found. Her voice was steady, professional, confident. They can't touch a thing, Hester. Not the house, not the trust, not your inheritance. You were never meant to be erased. Mom made sure of it. The reassurance was subtle, but profound. For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of control. Not just over property or money, but over my own life, my own story. Mom's foresight had handed me the tools, and I would wield them carefully. By nightfall, I returned to Grandma's apartment and looked at my notes again. I had a complete plan. I had proof. I had allies. And soon I would act. But not recklessly. Not emotionally. I had learned the hard way that patience and strategy were more powerful than anger or despair. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. I would step into the house, into the life that had once been stolen from me, and claim it, not just for myself, but for Mom, for everything she had protected. The morning sun fell softly on the porch as I approached the house. My steps were deliberate, careful, calm. No anger, no hesitation, just focus. The silver key in my hand felt heavy with purpose, smooth from years of Mom's careful use, yet warm in my palm like it carried her intent. I slipped it into the lock. The mechanism clicked. The door swung open, revealing the house that had been both mine and not mine. Inside, the air smelled faintly of Kayla's perfume and fresh paint. Furniture had shifted, walls were lighter, and objects I recognized were now foreign. But this was home, still, because I had a claim that was stronger than paint or fabric or social media captions. I moved carefully through each room, documenting what had been changed, rearranged, or added. Cameras blinked in corners, alarms monitored every doorway. I noted their positions, their blind spots, and the flow of movement throughout the house. Everything was data now, tools I could use if needed. It wasn't long before the first attempt came. Kayla, unaware that I was inside, approached the front door with the arrogance of assumed ownership. She swiped at the keypad. Red lights flashed. A small scream escaped her, sharp and frustrated. Dad followed, more calculated but equally blindsided. Their plan, as meticulous as they had thought it, was unraveling silently in my presence. I stayed hidden, observing, letting them make the first move. Every frustrated attempt, every muttered curse, was being recorded, noted, filed. I watched their assumptions crumble quietly, their belief that they had erased me, that the house, the funds, and the legacy were theirs to claim, fading with every passing moment. After they left, furious and bewildered, I moved into the rooms, taking photos, noting anomalies, securing documents. Everything Mom had left, briefcases, amendments, USB drives, went into a single, safe space. The house wasn't just mine by law, it was mine by preparation, by foresight, by understanding. I spent that evening reviewing the documents again, cross-referencing the trust amendments with bank notifications, the house deed, social media records, and emails. Every step Kayla and Dad had taken to exclude me had been anticipated. Mom had foreseen this. Her foresight was absolute, and now it was my tool. The next day, I contacted the legal representatives Mom had entrusted years ago. Their voices were calm, professional, confident. They confirmed every amendment, every clause, every safeguard. The house, the accounts, all legal ownership, reverted to me. Every prior beneficiary, including Dad and Kayla, had no claim. The plan had been Mom's all along. I had simply been waiting to execute it. Then, I prepared the final step. A letter went to Dad and Kayla, left precisely in the mailbox. No flourish, no greeting. You planned your way into a house that never belonged to you. Now plan your way out. I signed it simply, the one who stays. I didn't wait for confrontation. I didn't argue or plead. I had the law, the evidence, and the quiet certainty of someone who had been erased but had observed and prepared. The rest was procedural. Within hours, Dad and Kayla attempted to re-enter. The keypad, the alarms, the security measures, they all blocked them. They were met by the legal representatives, professional and unyielding. Trespassing notices were served. Copies of the sale agreement, utility shut-off notices, and evidence of the trust language were handed over. They had assumed control, but they had no legal standing. The tables had turned, quietly, efficiently. Kayla's social media rants began immediately. Tears in a car, accusations of theft, cries of injustice. I didn't respond. Screenshots of the trust, amendments, and notices went online quietly, factual, professional, leaving no room for spin. The public reaction was swift. Comments clarified the truth. She hadn't lost the house. She had been evicted from a fiction she had created. Dad's job ended. Kayla vanished from social media. I didn't need to check. Their plans, their story, their dominance, it had all collapsed under the weight of facts and preparation. I sat in the quiet of the house that evening. For the first time, the walls felt right. The air felt mine. Mom's belongings, small notes, photographs, the objects of her life, they surrounded me in a way that felt protective, grounding, real. I unplugged unnecessary electronics, shut off breakers except the essentials, and finally, I felt control, peace, and ownership. The house wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming the truth. The inheritance, the security, the legacy. These were symbols, yes, but also reminders that planning, patience, and careful observation could overcome manipulation and favoritism. I left one last gift in Grandma's hands, a portion of the funds, not as repayment, not as acknowledgement, but as gratitude. Gratitude for the guidance, for the small nudges, for the support. I didn't need Dad or Kayla to recognize it. The act itself mattered. By nightfall, I had everything ready for the next chapter. Packing, moving, reclaiming identity. Only the items that truly mattered came with me. Mom's scarf, a photograph of us on the porch, her hand resting on my shoulder, and the sense that the past had been honored, not erased. I closed the door behind me one last time. No slam, no fury, no lingering doubts. Just the soft click of a lock. A sound that finally meant this time, it wasn't temporary. This time, I had returned on my terms. The morning light fell through the kitchen windows, soft and warm, and for the first time in months, the house felt like mine. I moved slowly through each room, noting the small details, the faded blue curtains Mom had loved, the spots on the countertop where she used to set her teacup, the small dent in the floorboards near the front door. Every piece of this home had a memory, and every memory was now mine to protect. The legal confirmations were in place. Every document, every amendment, every safeguard my mother had left had been executed. Dad and Kayla's attempts to override reality had failed. They had tried to erase me, but the one who stays, as Mom had taught me, sees everything and acts deliberately. I unpacked only the essentials. Mom's scarf, a photo of us on the porch, my old desk lamp, and a few personal keepsakes that reminded me of who I was and who I had become. Everything else, the reminders of Kayla's intrusion, Dad's authority, the cold rules of exclusion, stayed behind. I had reclaimed the house, but I didn't need to fill it with anger or reminders. I needed it as a foundation for a life rebuilt. By midday, the quiet was absolute. The alarms were deactivated under my authorization, the cameras monitored the perimeter, and every lock was functional and under my control. I walked through the rooms with a sense of calm I hadn't felt since Mom passed. The air didn't feel oppressive anymore. The house wasn't a prison. It was a home, finally, truly, unequivocally mine. I called Grandma and Paula to let them know everything had been resolved. Both were calm, supportive, almost proud. "You did it the right way," Paula said. "No drama, no revenge, just precision and proof. That's how Mom would have wanted it." Grandma echoed the sentiment. "You stayed. You watched. You planned. That's why the house, your life, your legacy, it's all yours." And it was. Not just legally, not just physically, but emotionally. I had navigated betrayal, exclusion, and erasure, and I had emerged whole. I had honored Mom's teachings and proven that patience and strategy could triumph over spite and favoritism. A few weeks later, I finalized the sale of the house. Private sale, cash only, as Mom would have intended. I didn't need to live there to prove ownership. I didn't need to display victory. The sale was quiet, clean, and deliberate. The money went into my own trust account. My security, my freedom, my choice. Part of it, I shared with Grandma, not as repayment, but as gratitude. Part of it remained for me, for the life I wanted to build without interference. Before leaving, I left a small note in the mailbox addressed to Dad and Kayla. No anger, no accusations, just one line. You didn't lose me. You gave me the door. Signed simply, the one who stays. Then I packed my car and drove to my new apartment in another state. The journey was quiet, reflective. I thought about the months of exclusion, the weight of silent rules, the sting of betrayal, and the lessons of patience, observation, and deliberate action. They had tried to erase me, but all they did was sharpen me. Once I arrived, I unpacked the few items that mattered. Mom's scarf found its place on a chair, the photograph on the nightstand, the desk lamp on my new desk. I plugged in the USB drive Mom had left, curious one last time. The screen flickered, and Mom appeared, her voice soft but certain. If you're watching this, it means they did exactly what I feared. But you know the truth now. You don't need the house to have everything. You need only to stay. Stay focused, stay deliberate, stay yourself. I smiled, a small, private smile. She had always known I would figure it out, that I would reclaim what mattered, not with rage, but with precision. I closed the laptop and leaned back, the weight of months of grief and betrayal lifting just slightly. That night, I walked onto my own porch, the city lights stretching before me. The air was crisp, full of possibility. I wasn't defined by exclusion, by betrayal, by the mistakes of others. I was defined by resilience, by foresight, by the quiet strength I had discovered within myself. The world beyond the porch was wide, uncertain, and entirely mine. I had been erased once, pushed aside, silenced. But I stayed. I acted. I reclaimed. And now, finally, I could live, not in reaction to others, but in full command of my own life. I stepped back inside, shutting the door behind me. No slam, no anger, no lingering doubts. Just the quiet, steady knowledge that I had won in the only way that mattered. On my terms, deliberate, patient, and true to myself. The one who stays had stayed. And I would never be invisible again.